Welcome to 3 Billion Seconds, where we explore the future with the people who are creating it. I'm Rob Wolcott, and we're here today in Iceland with Insight Venture Partners, one of the world's leading venture capital firms. Insight has a program called Insight Ignite, where the firm brings together people from across sectors and industries, from technology, strategy, chief digital officers, CEOs, board members, to explore how new technology, software, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity impact the way that we add value in the world. And I'm pleased to be joined by Mamatha Chamarthi, one of the people at the forefront of change in the automotive industry. Mamatha, welcome.
Thank you.
So you're the chief digital officer of ZF, which is a $43 billion a year German auto supplier. You've been around, the company's been around for 102 years, and you're facing wholesale transformation in the industry. What's on the horizon?
I think what's interesting that's happening in the auto industry, well, I have been in the auto industry since 1995, and the most interesting thing is the convergence of the macro trends of autonomous driving, electric car, and connectivity and shared mobility.
And is it fair to say that in '95, when you entered the industry, when, by the way, you must have been in high school, I'm guessing, when you entered the industry in 1995, none of those factors were even on the radar screen?
Absolutely not. I still remember a presentation in 97, 98 timeframe to the CEO of Chrysler Group at the time, to Tom Lasoda, and he said, "Don't come and talk to me about technology. Technology is more of a back office thing." Yeah. And I wish I recorded him back then and played it back to him today to say that how technology has now become front and center in the car. And we are talking about 100 million lines of software code in the car. I don't think Tom would have really foreseen it then.
When you say 100 million lines of code in the car, give us some context. How does that compare with other modalities?
So if you look at an autopilot airplane, a Boeing 737, it has about 10 million lines of code. So that's the kind of complexity an airplane encounters. But compare it to a car and look at the unpredictable situations that a car faces, even with the driver assist functionality it has today. So it has to know how.
So you're talking about today. You're not talking about in 10 years.
In 10 years, it's going to be 3 times more complexity. But today we are not in an autonomous car. We are just in driver assist functionality in the car. So it is, how do you keep the car within the lanes? So lane keeping, parking assist, these kind of driver assist features that are creating the 100 million lines of code. It's just an example set of features. But tomorrow when the car becomes autonomous, it has to predict every situation and it has to react. So it's no longer today's deterministic algorithms. It has to be more artificial intelligence, deep learning, machine learning. Everything that we heard yesterday and today are really turning the car from a mechanical device into an autonomous device.
And it has to be able to, the vehicle has to be able to take context into account, to take data that might be novel. I remember a gentleman who used to run the autonomous vehicle program for Google early on, and he showed video of how the computer saw one of their pilot sessions in Palo Alto on real streets, and then how it looks visually to us. So the first showed a bunch of lights running around, and then this stream of lights popping around the screen, and you couldn't figure out what it was. And then he showed the actual video of a real street, car was on, and it was a woman in a wheelchair chasing a mother duck and her ducklings around the middle of the street. Now, I don't know how you plan for that. I don't see anybody sitting around a boardroom talking about the wheelchair duck scenario.
Yes, we are only talking about today the convergence of the technology trends, but it is not just the convergence of the technology trends. What the car would be facing in the future is also a moral and ethical dilemma.
The ethical dilemma. Talk about that for a second.
Because when a car is encountering a situation where it has a woman and it has a dog, for example, in front of it, and it has to, for it to pass by in that situation, it has to hit someone. Who does it choose? Who does the car choose?
Well, and certainly we have to deal with those issues as well currently as human beings. And
Yes.
we have thousands of accidents a year that face that kind of a dilemma. How do you imagine society will have to change, or regulation, legal issues will have to change in order to accommodate or digest this change?
I think I always keep saying that the technology is the easiest part. Though it's complicated, it's still going to be
Right.
the easy part to figure out. It is regulation, legislation, the society where the person has to let go of the control of driving of the car and allow a machine to take control of their destiny, sitting in a car, that they can be confident that this car would take them from point A to point B. I don't know if you've ever experienced an autonomous car. Even today, in an autonomous car, you're still in the forward-facing position. And I was sitting in a level 4 autonomous car.
Explain what level 4 is to the audience.
So level 4, there are different levels of autonomy in the car. Levels 1 and 2 are where your eyes are off, your hands are off. And then level 4 and 5 is where for periods of time, your brain is off, not even looking at where
I'd
the
say
car
most
is.
people are in level 5 on a regular basis.
Right. that's,
So basically-
that's probably why 90% of the accidents are caused by human beings.
Good point. So level 5 is, that's essentially full autonomy.
Full autonomy.
The vehicle is taking care of itself.
Completely.
So how does that look then, at level 4 and 5? What are the
So
transitions we have to take?
Just for us, for me sitting in the car, it was a very weird experience. After some time, I felt very nauseous
Really?
because I really wanted to control. I couldn't just let go that the car was taking me on this freeway. I was in Paris, and we were doing safety days with our customers. And I had a customer sitting in the passenger seat, and I was in the driver's seat with our VP
You were in
of
an
engineering in the back seat.
You were in an autonomous vehicle in Paris. What could possibly go
I
wrong?
know. And then
So-
it was after almost a mile and a half, and I told my VP of engineering, with all due respect, I really have to switch to the back seat because I'm going to literally puke now.
That would have been great for the sales call.
Yes, it is about the psychological, is the human, are we ready to let go of the driving and give control to the car? And when we start seeing the car making decisions for us that we would have made differently, that kind of the gap in the decision making is what makes you even more want to control it.
Yeah. So you work at a tier 1 supplier. So you're in an organization that sells directly to the OEMs like Mercedes-Benz or Ford Motor, et cetera. This is a broad ecosystem of players. The OEMs, the tier 1, tier 2, the regulators. What role does a tier 1 supplier, or should a tier 1 supplier be taking in addressing questions like this? Like, how should we generate change in society? How might regulation be relevant, regulatory change? What's the role that a tier 1 supplier should play in this ecosystem?
Very interesting question. I think just a bit of context on the OEM, which is the original equipment manufacturer, which is the Mercedes or BMW.
Yeah.
If you look at them, what they do is they assemble components from tier 1 suppliers. They integrate them and they brand it and sell it as a car. So most of the components and the intelligence in the car today is typically coming from tier 1 suppliers. And if you look at the origin of the tier 1 supplier to reduce the costs of components, that is why the tier 1 space was created. And I think today we are in a very interesting dilemma. As the software increases in the car, and more we cannot look at selling components like braking system and steering system, but selling systems like level 1 autonomy or level 2 autonomy. We have
Which
to have
impact multiple components within the
multiple
vehicle.
components. You need to have more integrated thinking, more systems engineering thinking. So you go from the piece part model that you have today as a tier 1 supplier and the margins you have on your components to more of a systems thinking.
Which changes business models too,
Which
correct?
changes business models too. And this is where the software industry and the high-tech industry, they are really, really good at doing the software integration and the systems integration. And that's why you see an entry of Google and everyone coming into this space, because they know that they have the strength in this area. So it's a pretty huge dilemma for tier one suppliers. Would we be relegated to just being commodity players?
Right.
With margins further eroded? Or would we get into the tier 0.5 space where we become the system integrator?
Many people are arguing about whether the new technology entrants like a Google, for instance, in this space, or an Apple potentially that's been bandied about for years, or the existing OEMs might have various advantages or disadvantages in the future of mobility. What's your position on that? Do the OEMs perhaps have some advantages in this race?
I think it all depends on what strategy the company is taking. The OEMs as well as the tier one suppliers, most of us have close to 100 years or more of experience in the automotive industry, have rich domain expertise in understanding the car inside and out. What the high-tech industry really understands well is the system integration and the software, and then the new business models.
Yeah, but if we're going from a piece of very complex hardware with multiple systems interacting with lots of mechanical engineering and hydraulics and everything else into basically a laptop on wheels, a bunch of lithium-ion batteries with wheels and for now a steering wheel, how does the domain expertise port into that new space?
At the end of the day, the car is still going to be a mechanical device.
Okay.
That will take you from point A to point B. Software alone cannot take you from point A to point B.
At least not until we have a virtual society, but.
Yes, yes. But I
Great.
think even in level 4, level 5 autonomy, still the car is a mechanical device. And a lot of people think that mechanical engineering and mechanical components have reached a level of design saturation. That's not totally true. For the car components, even the systems to get over-the-air update ready, even the mechanical components have to have the capability to take future software updates.
Sure.
So even they have to be redesigned, even for level 4, level 5 autonomy.
Yeah.
So I don't think that mechanical engineering and mechanical design of the car has reached that saturation.
And related to these systems, so for instance, ZF has strength in the braking, in the field of braking. They're still going to have brakes on electric vehicles, for instance, and that has to somehow interact effectively with an autonomous system with data collection, et cetera. So one of the things that has impressed me about ZF's position or direction in this space is see, think, act.
Yes.
This is the articulation of the vision. It's a real vision for the next 10 or 20 years, how we transition. Tell us about see, think, act and what that means for ZF.
For us, our strategy, which we call today ZF 2025 strategy, it started in 2013. And in 2013, our visionary CEO had a great vision.
Stefan
Sommer had a great vision to zero accidents and zero emissions. That was our goal as a company. So because 90% of the
zero accidents,
and
zero emissions
in the world.
And he was serious about this.
And he was very serious about it.
So how can you feel confident to make an objective like that? I mean, it's certainly something we all should aspire to have.
Yes.
But how could you feel confident about pursuing that vision?
I think that's when he took that vision and cut it down into what can we do to contribute to that. And that's when we
Great.
came up with the see, think, and act strategy, where we said, where he said, the 102 years we have been really refining, that performance and feedback mechanism. We have been refining our mechanical components for 102 years. And the acquisition of TRW, an American tier 1 automotive supplier, was a big step in strengthening the C or the sensor portfolio. Because TRW was in the active and passive safety technologies with airbags, braking, but also cameras and electronic sensors. And the think is where we had huge gaps. And think is where we really had to get closer and closer to mimicking the human brain. And we thought that this is where the high-tech industry really excels. And that forged a partnership with Nvidia. And
this is an initiative that your office has been
Exactly.
directly involved in.
Right.
Tell us about that initiative with Nvidia.
So in 2016, December of 2016, we started this thinking about concept on how we could come up with a product working with Nvidia, an artificial intelligence product, to create level 1 and level 2 driver assist functionality. So when your foot is off the brake pedal and when your hands are off the steering wheel. So that is level 1 and level 2.
Okay.
So we started this concept in 2016, and by Consumer Electronics Show in 2017, we had come up with a generation 1 of a product that we call ZF Pro AI. This is Pro Artificial Intelligence. So into our safety ECU, we embedded NVIDIA's graphics processing unit. So with supercompute capabilities.
And an ECU is a control unit inside the
electronic
vehicle.
control unit. So that is the one where you're coding, and this is a control unit that's sitting between your mechanical components and your sensors.
Great.
So it's taking input from the sensor and processing it and changing it into a control command for the actuator. So that's the ECU. And so we embedded the GPU to start making more of this, our vision is to make the sensors dumb and do sensor fusion in the ECU, in this ZF Pro AI. So we would get multiple inputs from camera technology, from LiDAR, from radar, and it is almost like the 4 blind men and the elephant. The camera sees what it can see, the LiDAR sees what it can, and radar. And these are all redundant technologies, but when you put all of this data together, you get a very clear picture of, I am looking at Robert Wolcott. Or I'm looking at, I would say Robert Wolcott is probably an artificial intelligence, deep learning, understanding your face, but at least I'm looking at a human being that is, 6 foot tall, and, so what is it that I'm encountering as a car?
So I've never been referred to as artificial intelligence, but I appreciate that. So this partnership with Nvidia is clearly a long-term partnership.
Yes.
And at least from my experience, we've talked about this before, one of the challenges is that traditional automotive companies want to own everything. They want to have control of the intellectual property. Now here's a situation where you're working with a technology leader like Nvidia, and their graphic processing unit, the GPU, is their gold. And you're working together to customize that for specific applications. How have you navigated within ZF to make sure we can have this kind of a deep development partnership where we're not owning everything?
I think it's been quite a bit of journey with Nvidia. They have pushed us I think they've pushed us a lot, I would say, on this journey. When we started, within a few weeks when we came up with this concept, or Gen 1, it was a lot of their algorithm engineers and data scientists that were working with us, with a small team of domain experts from our active safety business unit. But more and more, it became evident that we need to have that kind of an expertise also in-house. And they were in Silicon Valley, and we are a Friedrichshafen, southern German-based company. And most of the time, they were flying into Friedrichshafen. And that was also kind of a bit of a cultural difference that we have noticed, and we had to adapt to in our company. And we have created our own Silicon Valley hub.
Right.
Where we said that we
At
would
plug
have
and play, correct?
At plug and play, but
Yeah.
also so that we can partner better with Nvidia. At the recent Consumer Electronics Show, we have launched the Generation 3 of the product. So in a very, very short time.
Generation 3. So when was the
Generation
last
3.
time an automotive company accomplished 3 generations of a product in 1.5 years?
Exactly. And that is the change that this partnership has brought, that's the change in thinking this partnership has brought to us as a company.
So let's expand that topic. A 102-year-old corporation, obviously very successful in so many ways, but it's ingrained, the behaviors, the orthodoxies, how we make money, everything is ingrained in that great organization. But now we need to do it differently. We need to do it faster. We need to do it in more diverse ways with more partners. What is something you've learned about this digital transformation? What works, what doesn't work, perhaps?
I think the dilemma that we have with regards to digital transformation is pretty much, I think, the same as every company is probably going through, because our current business is growing at such a healthy pace. And that also requires a lot of investment in it. Because the traditional transmission, that 8-speed transmission, the 9-speed transmission, they're not going away completely.
Right. You still have to supply the internal combustions, the diesel vehicles, et cetera.
Exactly. So, and that is really having such a healthy growth, and we are seeing year over year, 7 to 8% increase in our business.
So that, on the one hand, should give you the resources and the capability to invest, but on the other hand, people say, well, why do we need to change?
Exactly.
We're doing great.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you overcome that?
But I think it needs really a visionary CEO, a tone from the top that says that we are going to balance both our stability or the efficiency side of the business and also with agility, that we need to pave the way for future innovations to happen, because at some point in time in the future, the traditional transmissions will go down and the electric transmission will pick up, or the electric drivetrain will pick up. So we have created a new business unit that is focused on electric drivetrain called the e-mobility division. And we have now created a new business unit that's focused on level 4 and level 5 autonomous driving. So wherever we see that we need to invest, we have tried to isolate in such a way that we are not completely isolating it.
Right. So insulated from the rest of the company.
Insulating it, but still making sure that we have a dual focus on both the current business as well as the future.
And so, Dr. Wolf-Hennig Scheider, your new CEO, long experience in the industry, comes to ZF, the See, Think, Act, a very diverse portfolio of investments. What role is he playing in this transition?
I think just yesterday he did the global press conference, and at the global press conference he said that no other tier 1 automotive supplier has the broad, diverse portfolio of components that ZF has. So if there is anyone that's going to be hugely successful in level 4, level 5 autonomous driving, if the focus is there, it would be ZF.
So he sees the opportunity. So the question is, what do we need to do to get there? You've got great partners like Nvidia and others. You have entrant into the industry from entrants like Google, for instance. They have nearly unlimited money for all intents and purposes. How do you navigate that as a traditional operating company?
I think that's a very interesting question, because the traditional business that we have is measured with, clear revenue, clear business case. And when you look at these new businesses that we are getting into, they don't have like such clear business cases.
Right.
When we are going to get the return, and when and how much.
Right.
We refer to that as the ketchup bottle.
Why the ketchup bottle?
Because, the ketchup, if you really don't know how much is going to come out of it.
So don't shake too hard.
Don't shake too hard.
Well, in this shaking, if you have this separate unit, e-mobility, and then you have the separate R&D effort around 4 and 5, you have hypotheses as to how long it'll take to get some of these technologies out to market. What kind of horizon is ZF thinking about in terms of the 4s and the 5s in the world?
I think in terms of electric, we are preparing more for 2030, 2025 and 30.
Okay.
We think that there would be a pretty good percentage of electric vehicles in the market.
Okay.
In terms of autonomous driving, I think we still believe that the way it is going to evolve, it's going to be a very gradual evolution. Initially, it would be people movers and cargo movers in geofenced areas.
Great. So there's nice control of the environment.
Right.
It's like a factory
There is
almost.
predictability
Yeah.
in the environment.
Yeah.
And that's why we are partnering with University of Aachen and on a project called Ego Mover,
Okay.
where we are providing all of the components and level 4 autonomy. And this Ego Mover would be used in college campuses and in
Airports, perhaps.
in airports and
Yeah.
also in city centers.
Great.
To move people and to move cargo.
Well, I can definitely think of a few people who need an ego mover, so we can maybe talk about that. So what in this, in your journey so far of making change happen within this very successful, in many ways, traditional firm, what is something you've learned about what works?
I think what really works is I feel that the 146,000 employees that we have all around the world are at the periphery of action.
What do you mean the periphery of action?
Because they are the ones that on a daily basis are seeing the pleasure and pain of working with ZF, whether it is ZF's products or ZF's processes. And we recently had a challenge, a digital innovation challenge called Who Wants to Be a Digital Entrepreneur? And we called upon all of the employees. And there were 2 employees that presented an idea. And they said that they picked up this idea. These 2 employees, one is from our e-mobility division, and the other one is from corporate strategy.
And as I recall, they're young employees.
They are very young, they're 20 plus.
Wow.
And they were sitting together watching an external pitch night where a startup called Noiseless Acoustics from Finland was presenting.
Great.
And they thought, why not we keep talking about cameras and electronic sensors as inputs into autonomous car or driver assist functionality. Why not use sound as another sensory input?
And the industry wasn't there yet. The industry wasn't paying much attention to that.
Attention to sound.
Yeah.
And for example, in our industrial equipment, like farm tractors, most of the accidents are where children are playing behind a tractor. And there are a lot of fatalities that happen because people have not heard the children playing behind the tractors. So with our goal of Vision zero accidents for both passenger cars as well as on the farmland. So we thought that we should, from the digital office, we should support these employees. And we gave them a very small amount of money and resources and removed all barriers of typical bureaucratic decision making that happens in a company, typically any large companies. And,
Well, fortunately, we don't have bureaucracy in universities, so everything's fine.
So we kind of insulated the team, these 2 employees and the team, and allowed them to develop a prototype. And during one of our top leadership meetings, they brought a car that was equipped with
Really?
microphones.
Already?
And it was a BMW that was equipped with microphones and had the software and had a little display. And it said when there was an ambulance that was coming from, coming towards the car or coming from behind, and it alerted if you had to go into the right lane and if the right lane was available for you to move into the right lane. So think about a hearing impaired person. And they're not able to discern the sound of an ambulance coming.
Right.
And so now you're providing another input. And so you're creating a safe situation.
And certainly, once we start to add autonomy, that's another input
Right.
set of sensors that the autonomous system can use to increase safety.
Exactly. And then we demonstrated this to a few of the OEMs. And we have recently got an RFI from one of the OEMs for 300,000 units of what we call now Sound AI as a product.
Wow.
So they started this in July. In March, they were at the pitch
July
night.
of this year?
July of
July of 2017.
July
Right.
of 2017.
July of 2017.
And in a very
And it's now
short
March
period-
of 2018. So less
Exactly.
than a year, you have an RFI from an OEM
Yeah.
for this technology. How are those 2 young executives feeling?
they are feeling at the top of the world. They feel like they really wanted always to work in an engineering company.
Yeah.
And now they feel like if they have great ideas, they have the buy-in from the top
Yeah.
to explore, and they feel great.
That's exciting. Shifting a bit, what most concerns you about, say, the next decade in this field of mobility and your role with ZF? What most concerns you?
Biggest concern that I have is it's not just the technology coming together for autonomy, but it is also the societal changes. It's a huge transformation that we have to go through as humankind, I would say, to get into that level 4, level 5 autonomous car. Today we are focused so much on the technological aspects of it, that we forget about the regulations, the legislation. All of these have to co-evolve to make autonomous car more mainstream. And I think there are many mistakes that would happen that would cost, like the recent Uber incident,
Right.
that would cost
Right.
a life.
Yeah.
So having a goal like Vision Zero, zero accidents, and how tolerable will we be to, make those kinds of mistakes?
So absolutely agree, although it'll also take a mindset or a paradigm shift for people, because what happened recently with the Uber accident was horrid and probably should not have happened, given the data that we have about it. But at the same time, people will react to these events for sure, because it's the new thing. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of people die in road accidents as a result of human drivers. So we have to start to get over the notion that, number one, that we're even in control as human beings in the world, that one can really doubt that. But number two, that we can have the trust and that we have the technology, the capability, the knowledge to provide a better life as a result. Speaking of a better life, how did you find your way into the automotive industry? Were you a 3-year-old watching Disney and you saw a car and you said, I want to do that? Or how did this happen?
I was definitely not a 3-year-old, but a 21-year-old sitting in, I would say, close to Bangalore in a city called Kolar Goldfields. I was reading a Fortune magazine, and I was reading about the Chrysler building that is in Auburn Hills, Michigan, that was being built. This was in 93, 94.
Okay.
And little did I realize that I would not only move to the US, but the first job that I would take up would be in the automotive industry.
Wow.
And I was standing in the very building in Auburn Hills that I read about in the Fortune magazine a few years ago. It was kind of a really very, very interesting experience.
Now I'm going to go out on a limb a little bit here. When you read that article at home near Bangalore, and you had no idea that was the direction you were going to take, did it feel different at the time? Do you remember? Did it stand out? Did it say something to you, or was it just something that happened as a coincidence
I
of
was
life?
just fascinated by the massive structure that was coming up. And only when I really started my job, and day one, when I got to the building and I was standing at the reception, it really hit me that I was standing in the same building that I read about. And I think that's when my passion for the automotive industry started, and I've been in the automotive industry for more than 20 years.
Right, with TRW, so supplier, with Chrysler, a tier.
With Chrysler, with Daimler
OEM.
Chrysler, with Daimler. So I worked both sides of the ocean.
Okay, here's a good question. German, American, which is better?
No comment.
A quick thought. I mean, it's exciting to see the evolution of truly global businesses, where you're not just a business that happens to have offices overseas, but where you're a business that has people from very different cultures in very different parts of the world working together to pull in the same directions. And I think where we are in business today is far different than 20 or 30 years ago when you and I were starting in business. What's one thing you've learned about bringing the world together around common missions, for instance?
I think one of the things that I've noticed is every culture and every country has a strength and a competence that that is naturally evolving. Say, for example, in Israel, there is a competence around imaging and cybersecurity. In Shanghai, I think everything that the rest of the world is doing, there is a Chinese picture of it that's evolving in Beijing and Shanghai.
Yeah.
And in India, it's about growing innovation through their 10,000 plus startups mission. And in Berlin, it is around Industry 4.0. I think a company like us can only be successful if it can truly tap into this competence that's naturally evolving in each of these regions and brings it together. And that's why we have this ecosystem strategy and a global ecosystem strategy that we as ZF are going after.
Great, and also one of the reasons you're here in Iceland with Insight Venture Partners. Mamatha, the back office is becoming front and center. IT is in the middle of any intelligent company's strategy, regardless of how many years we've been on Earth. And technology is the easy part, as you said. How do we affect human change, not only in ourselves, but in society and our organizations that are optimized to do whatever we did yesterday? How do we let go of control? Let go of control that where there really is a life or death component to letting go of control. But when you are able to let go in a smart way, you can do far more than you did before. It's only as a result, as you said, of good partners. And those good partners push us. They experience the pleasure and the pain. I loved your comment about pleasure and pain of these transformations. When faced with extraordinary transformations, as we all are, we need big mission objectives, some things sometimes that seem unrealistic.
Right.
And I'd say the mission objectives of ZF are not only unrealistic, but achievable. 0 accidents, 0 waste, because companies like ZF are trying their best to make them happen.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.